Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to invite all the panelists to come up and join me on stage. How's everyone doing? Good? So I'm super excited to moderate the panel today. It's just a rare opportunity to have some of the smartest, amazing minds on AI in the industry with us. To start out with, just a quick intro of myself. My name is Paul Shao. I'm a general partner at Canvas Venture. We're a venture capital firm managing about $500 million. We've invested a few AI companies over the years. One of them you might know the best is Siri, which many of you probably have your phone before Apple bought it. And we've continued our investment across the different fields. I think to start out with, what we'll do is just ask each panelist to say a word about themselves. Probably mention one pragmatic project that they have done or have seen with using AI. Quick words about the company, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So my name is Gunnar Carlson. I'm a recovering academic, a retired math professor at Stanford. Started a company, Ayasdi, based on Stanford research about 8 or 9 years ago. And we do data analytics in support of artificial intelligence. One of the things I'm particularly happy about is that we have dealt with a large global customer to solve an anti-money laundering problem, to lower false positives dramatically. And it kind of goes toward our thinking about artificial intelligence, which is that it isn't all about the very sexy stuff that one hears about, or, self-driving cars and so forth. There are some very simple things, very pragmatic things that actually add a lot of value.
My name is Chris Bondi. I'm CMO of Neuron Labs. We are an AI company that is accessed through AI as a service, and we're truly an ingredient brand. Whereas everything on the internet is very personalized, we personalize the real world. So what is a person doing? What are their behaviors? What are their personas? What are their preferences? And then we enable technologies, products, to personalize and adapt to them based on who they are without coding, and then also to respond to any anomalies. One of the things that I'm proudest of with the company is that we have already, in our young life, have been able to been in a position to be able to help save lives when it comes to medication adherence. We've had reports back from our customers of people who now have been able to, who now have changed their behavior and gone from having many hypos related to diabetes hypos to dramatically reducing it. So the patient outcomes have been significant.
Hi there, my name is Soma Velayutham. So I spent about 20 years in the telecoms industry, and I've joined NVIDIA now. I'm part of the AI and deep learning group, heading the telecom vertical. So my goal and my mandate in the company is to evangelize AI and deep learning into the telecom industry. A little bit about NVIDIA. So NVIDIA was experimenting with supercharged computing, and they were building computers for what we call as the Da Vincis and Einsteins of the world today. And with the AI and deep learning and VR, AR, the workloads being very demanding, NVIDIA has lent itself to become the de facto platform for AI and deep learning. So that's where we are. And a simple application that Paul mentioned is, if you come to NVIDIA Cafe, we have this cool little image recognition machine. So when you get your stuff in the cafe and your salads and soup, you just leave it in the machine. It recognizes what it is and gives you a price and tells you how many calories. you swipe your card and you walk away. So I thought that was a very pragmatic application that I've seen.
It's a good company, Match Gym, that's what it's called. Michael?
Not sure we all want to know how many calories. So my name is Michael Fitzpatrick. I am the president and COO of a company called Pullstring. Pullstring was founded about 6 years ago with a mission to create talking toys. It was born out of a CTO from Pixar, so it might make a little more sense. And the goal was to enable toy manufacturers to create talking experiences with kids' toys. We've since expanded that quite a bit to support the authoring and creation of conversational experiences across a variety of devices, whether those be IoT devices or the Amazon Echo devices. I'm just curious for this group, show of hands, do you own an Echo somewhere in your house today? Plans to own an Echo? Okay, so just about everybody. So we help build and enable experiences by enabling creative professionals and technologists alike to create conversational experiences using AI, and look forward to the conversation.
Good. Okay, I'm Danny Lang. I'm VP of AI at Unity Technologies, where I lead an effort to bring AI and deep learning to over 1 million game developers, more than 1 billion monthly active players, on more than 2.5 billion devices. It's very exciting to enable these new technologies for such a wide problem domain. Before joining Unity, I was head of machine learning at Uber, where I worked on a company-wide platform called Michelangelo that supports the Uber app, map building, and self-driving vehicles. And before that, I was general manager for machine learning at Amazon. I also launched a company-wide platform for machine learning at Amazon. I also launched the first machine learning service on AWS. Before that, I ran the machine learning toolkit team at Microsoft, and I did my first intelligent agent development in 1993 as a scientist at IBM Research. So trust me, we have come a very, very long way today.
And so, Danny, actually, that's a perfect segue into, let's set the stage. What is AI and what is not AI?
Yeah. Everybody, we all have our own definitions, yeah? So I have mine. And AI, I view AI as the perception. The tools, the mechanism, the technology underneath, that's deep learning, that's machine learning. But AI is the appearance. If it appears smart and insightful, the app, the tool you're using, I would judge it as AI. But it's not, one particular solution. It's the aggregate of a lot of smartness achieved by deep learning and machine learning.
Chris, anything to add to that?
Yes, so I thoroughly disagree that AI. Wow, you said
We
you
said we're
wanted-
going to have friendly disagreements on this panel.
So one of my biggest pet peeves is the perception that everything that appears intelligent is AI. So I would argue that Alexa, which most of you have, is not intelligent. It is wonderful, but it is connectivity. It is voice activated. But most of the things that are happening with it are things that are programmed in. So I cannot say, Alexa, when is Paul due to be home? Alexa doesn't know who Paul is. Alexa doesn't know where Paul is. Alexa is a great opportunity to be able to, it's a great place that people can now code in the AI piece of that. But it doesn't have the intelligence part now. It's the reason why Gartner considers it connected and not AI. So what I think AI starts with machine learning as part of that, and then the ability to self-adapt.
Danny or Michael?
Would you like to retort?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Alexa is not AI. because I don't perceive it as particularly intelligent. Yeah?
Okay.
It's a voice response systems, and it's hardwired, so is Siri. They're not adaptive at all. I think that you could add elements, and I know that has been tried, not particularly successful yet at Amazon, to add that those dynamics to the application. But then the users react against that, becomes unpredictable.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I said I think it's a start. I will use the word Trojan horse. It's a great place to get a foot place in a home that eventually can have that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things you're highlighting that's missing is context awareness. And that's one of the things that we've spent a lot of time working with customers and folks who are trying to embark down this journey on, is helping to understand that just because it can recognize an image or it can recognize an intent, that doesn't give it the context to actually do something intelligent with it. So I agree there's some initial limitations, but I am also seeing a new generation of children who are growing up with these devices and becoming completely familiar, much like many children are now, with touch-based interfaces. And so I feel like the acceleration here of general acceptance, because I certainly, when it first came out, was terrified by the idea of a listening device in my home. That's quickly eroding as people become more and more comfortable with the idea that this could be an actually useful tool.
So, I mean, NVIDIA has the best view on sort of what's happening, right? It's becoming the new platform war between Amazon, Google, even Facebook, Microsoft across. What do you see? Other stats you can share that sort of help us understand how AI has penetrated both in consumer and enterprise world?
Sure. So I look at AI from a system perspective, right? If you look at it, if you have a 3-year-old kid and if the kid has an experience and he or she can evolve from that experience to get smarter about it. So the same way, if you have a logic system, you write the code once. If the system experiences it, it's just going to repeat itself. For me, a difference between an AI system and a logic-driven system is an AI system is able to evolve and get smarter based on the input that it's getting. So that's my definition of AI, if the system is able to evolve or not.
Got it.
Yeah, so I actually kind of want to add something to the requirements for AI, or what I would like to see as requirements for AI. And it kind of comes out of having spoken at many places like this and discussed the fact that many parts of machine learning and AI are really black boxes. That is to say, they do things, but we don't understand how they do them. And the consequence of that can be, that unlike a car, where the car's broken down, but you will also find out in short order what it was that broke down and what it takes to fix it. We need to have those same things available in the artificial intelligence that we do. So I think it means that the answers need to be, in the long term, more complex. They need to involve answers with explanations, answers with suggestions of how you proceed going forward.
That's great. So, I mean, one of the things that, for audience here, Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, said AI represents probably the largest economic opportunity for the next couple of decades. We want to understand, for your business, how do you get started, right? Like, what does it mean to actually bring AI into our business? I was wondering, maybe start with you, Soma or Michael, your sort of some practical advice. How does one get started by incorporating AI into my business?
So I have a technical background and a background in psychology. So a lot of my references are going to be a little bit psychological. So, so again, going back to this, I think moving along the journey of AI is a little bit like addiction. You got to accept it first, that it's going to happen. If you're in denial that it's not going to happen, then you're not going to go anywhere. So AI is actually a process and a journey. It's not a switch you turn on and everything becomes AI. So in my view, as you start the journey, first is accept it and be very open about what's happening in other industries. I think sometimes executives tend to be very short-term focused or very performance-driven, and they want to have a box that's going to perform immediately. And AI is an evolutionary technology, right? It's going to get smarter and smarter as it goes on. So you need to give itself some time. Sort of working with kids, you need to give the kids some time to kind of grow up. So read a lot, understand in adjacent industries what's happening, how they have succeeded from adjacent industries, bring that over to your current industry, because you may or may not have direct reference in your industry, right? The second thing I would do is actually talent, because AI is very much about talent. You got to create a fertile ground for the talent to think AI, because we've been ingrained to think very logically. A software developer is expected to develop a logic. In AI, it's very different. You develop an algorithm, and then the algorithm drives the logic. So to almost tell the software developer you are going to teach the software to write software, and you are not the software developer. So it's a different mindset, and you need to breed that kind of talent, and it's a long-term journey. So I would say let's train and retrain our staff. Let's explore opportunities from the adjacent industries, and it's a long-term journey, long-term investment.
I actually have something to add to
Yeah,
that.
please, please.
I think that the other thing is I think you should, I think that all of that makes sense. I think for it to be successful, though, you also need to look at what the company's KPIs are, and even before you're thinking of AI, what are the company's KPIs, or what are specific areas of the companies, what are the KPIs, and then can AI help in that area? Because if you don't look at it from that way, then it becomes a nice to have or a shiny toy, and it's the first thing that isn't supported. But if you can say, okay, the company's KPIs are X, Y, and Z, and an AI approach can get us from here to here, can help us improve in this much, then suddenly it gets the buy-in, and we'll be able to then move forward.
Danny, you have had the
Yeah,
most,
I'm shaking my. I don't think you're ambitious enough. I think that AI is a complete and total disruption, and I think it's not about software engineers. It's about data, and it's about being able to train systems rather than program systems. And we see that increasingly. When it's self-driving vehicles, maybe a very challenging area, but games. It doesn't really matter if you kill off a character in a game by accident. So it's a fantastic lab for trying these things. And rather than programming characters in games, we basically train them. We either train them by having the computer play against itself and learn from that, or we have the computer play against people and learn from that, or the latest using imitation learning, which is essentially that I demonstrate to the computer what I want the character to do, and it learns from that. In all three cases, there's really no programming involved any longer. It's a service. It's a machine learning service or deep learning service that basically bootstrap behavior that even today is still being developed by software engineers. Yeah? And we see that. We saw it at Uber with many applications. We saw it at Amazon, where it's really not about the application, the algorithms. At Amazon, we used 3 algorithms company-wide. It's about the data you feed into the algorithm. Yeah. We see it with deep learning, reinforcement learning, which we do a lot about at Unity. We use the same algorithm for everything, more or less. Yeah? So it's really a matter of understanding to build up the ecosystem that generates the unique data for your business. And that's actually, in my opinion, where the real, that's where the gold is.
And if I may add one thing to that, serving on boards of companies where initially we thought these algorithms really matters. I resonate with what Danny said is we realized the train and label data is really the current interesting bottleneck, that a lot of these black boxes, the platform companies are really making them available for free to everyone. And so that we are surprised by how fast that whole space has actually commoditized. And that's something that's really surprising. So much, sorry.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with him. And this is the mindset shift. It's not programming. It's we are training systems. Yeah. Training systems that train itself, right? And this is the mindset shift that we need to make. And coming to telecoms, one of the challenges people ask, why isn't telecom embracing AI as much as it needs? We actually have a lot of data, and people would say telecom has a lot of data. True, but is it labeled data that machine can crawl and learn upon and train itself? If you look at 3GPP standards and the flags in your in the call flow data, it's actually highly encoded. You need to have data that can be labeled and learned by machines. It's not democratic, right? The data is not readable. It's not a syntax on a web page that a Google machine or Amazon machine can learn. So one of the things that the challenge for the industry is how can you create labeled data, which I call computable data, which then computers can crawl and learn upon.
Conrad, thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'd like to add to this that a lot of the problems that we see are, come from the fact that really when we're doing artificial intelligence, we're going to be doing collaboration between humans and machines. It's not entirely artificial. Think about dealing with MDs and trying to propose solutions or care paths, or think about dealing with financial regulators who need to be able to be in that loop and understand will not accept, again, black and white answers. So in terms of installing it and putting AI or machine learning into companies' processes, one has to consider the people that you have on the ground, the people that are actually going to be doing the interacting with these processes. And frankly, that's been a finding for us. That's a huge part of what we do.
As we think about putting AI into the various business processes or systems, you guys are all great practitioners. What are some of the bottlenecks and challenges that people will face, when you look out the next 6 to 12 months? Just curious if you can share some of the learnings already about the challenges and gotchas that we should know about.
I can start. There's two that come to mind. One is privacy, and where the line is with privacy in each country and culturally. So how much information is being collected, how much is given to if it's within a company, to the being able to be seen by the executives. If it's in our case, how much has been given to an app provider. So I think that's one. I think the second part of that is from AI overall is, again, because we're dealing with the physical world, it's the quality of the data and the sensors. So a very brief example, I just came back from this morning from our technology office, and there was a scientist who is working on what's happening in specific rooms, not in a home. So it's not how our little robot vacuum cleaners are now mapping our homes, but it is who's in front of the TV, which specific person, which specific person is in front of a smart stove. Those type of things, being able to get that quality data is, now it just stops at the door. And so I think that the sensor data is one of the challenges.
Boy, it always comes back to data, doesn't it?
It
right?
does.
The quality of what we're talking about, the labeled data, the quality of the data matters so much.
I would also say it comes to the complexity of the data. That is to say, even if the data is very high quality, if it's organized in a very kludgy way, or if it's just, if it's just sort of problematic and complicated, sitting in various databases, that's another one of the things that we've certainly found to be a large challenge, and it puts a lot of time into our sales cycle. The fact that we need to do that.
Yeah, Michael.
I'll offer a counter to the emphasis on data, which is in our work with helping companies figure out ways to leverage AI for engaging customers and partners, that we've actually had to rekindle that relationship-based engagement as well, and try to figure out what's the personality and brand that we want to come across, even if we're using things like generative dialogue to push interaction. So there's a tremendous amount of value, no question, in data, but also then making sure that, particularly in the case of interactions with customers, that you're not losing the core attributes that make your company is something that we're still doing a bit of education on.
Yeah, so I think we all agree that data is one of the challenges. When you see an Uber self-driving car in the streets of San Francisco, it's not like someone coded that car and now they're out testing it and see if it hits anything, yeah? They're actually out collecting data, yeah? So they're driving all these vehicles around. Number one purpose is collect data, and then we bring it back home, and then we actually have someone manually sitting and labeling the data to help the computer understand what it saw. That is a serious bottleneck, yeah? There are ways around it, but there are lots of examples of that. And then the other one that concerns me a lot, especially being in the gaming business, is the privacy issue. And machine learning is kind of very powerful there, because if you take out information out of your data, but you give me more and more data, I can often learn what you took out. So if you don't, say you're an Amazon customer and you don't want to reveal your gender, I just have to do a little machine learning on your purchasing habits, and I know exactly your gender, yeah? You can't hide it, yeah? And that's some of the challenges that we are facing here, especially with EU.
GDPR.
There are legal issues in EU because you actually have to argue or promise that you're not trying to relearn private information, which is a challenge to always adhere to that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you're putting that human in the middle to label the data that you are collecting from all the different sources, right? I mean, funny, we have a company called Cloudflower that sort of does a lot of that work as well. Such a critical missing step. Soma?
Yeah, I look at it, three things. I mean, data we've talked enough about. Two other things is the algorithm and the compute power, right? Which we think NVIDIA is uniquely positioned for that. But if you take these three things, what it would have taken him 5 years ago, today has been actually come a long way. So one of the things that when we get started in AI, we need to think about it. We don't have to do it ourselves. There's a lot of platforms in place today that would not have been available 5 years ago, both in terms of compute, in terms of open source algorithms, in terms of labeled data. ImageNet is a classic example. It's labeled data out there. So I think we need to focus on the use case and the business value and not spend too much time on this going after the platform issues. You know, there are a lot of companies who are now focusing on platforms, and we should leverage on those platforms and focus on the business values that we want to drive out of that. One syndrome in telecoms that we tend to have is, those of you who've been in the industry long enough, is this concept called killer app. People would say, you know, what's the killer app for AI? Well, you might not find one. What you need to do is, I guess you need to understand that you need to embrace an environment that could potentially lend itself to a killer app, but you might not have an ROI starting off with a killer app.
Yeah. Well, here comes the fun part. Let's talk about the future. Love each one of you to have 1 to 3 predictions. Where are we headed with AI? And what is one thing that might be underappreciated by the industry? Gunnar, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think we're headed, so the deep learning is obviously a revolution that's come on. It actually started a long time ago, but it's really being leveraged now. I think we're going to be seeing that turn away from being purely an engineering issue, purely computational, and developed in a way where it can generate more human understandable models, and in fact, and do so in an understandable way. That is to say, we'll be understanding what it's doing, which I think it's fair to say that now we can't. And a byproduct of that will be that the problems that one sees now in terms of adversarial behavior in there, that is to say, where that can be spoofed, those will start to go away as we start to understand what we're doing.
Yeah. Chris?
I think that even though I started with all the things that are not AI, I think that within a short period of time, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, it'll be so ubiquitous that the idea that AI is something new and exciting it'll, in my opinion, continue to be exciting, but it won't be the futuristic assumption that it is now. The reality is that it's here now, and it'll be ubiquitous in so many things that we won't need to say it's AI enhanced, it's AI special. And I think that part, it'll just be driving, particularly in the consumer world, maybe even more than in the business world.
So I think human race is extremely versatile. We are very adaptable. So there's this myth that AI is going to take over the world and take over human race. I don't think that's going to happen. And as I said, we are very adaptable. I think we'll augment AI into our lifestyles, very much like we've augmented the mobile phones into our lifestyle, right? It's become part of our life, and we will have a lot of AI assistants and AI integrated into our lifestyle.
There's a fear that AI might destroy a lot of jobs. Do you have a perspective on that, Soma or Michael? No?
You want to answer that?
Continue.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's going to enable a lot of jobs. Let me give you a few examples. If you look at the aging population in Japan, I mean, they have we have a couple of human crises that we need to solve. And I think AI is perfectly suited for that. I know people tend to take AI more on the negative side, but I think it's more positive than negative.
Yeah.
If you look at the aging population in Japan, if you look at trying to do very risky jobs, like cleaning a uranium reactor, I think a lot of these things could be done by robotics and AI. So I think it's more positive for the human race.
Yeah, I've been around long enough to remember when email emerged and everybody thought, well, that's the end of paper. So I think we've got a few decades left.
We're still killing trees.
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things I'm most excited about is if 5 years ago to run a process that could tell you what was in an image was an incredibly expensive and laborious process. Today, I can thank you for all of your good work. I can shoot an image off to an API and get a result back in a fraction of a second. That is pretty remarkable in just a few years. So I think another thing that I'm excited about, in addition to what's been said, is just the accessibility to the benefits of these platforms that have been developed and are increasingly being made available to individual developers, companies, et cetera, at free or nearly free. And so I feel like that's going to push the field forward very quickly and offer some incredible increases in the rate of adoption and success going forward.
Danny?
Yeah, I do think that AI is going to take over the world, and it's also going to eat the jobs. But we can rest. It's going to take at least 10 years. So in the meantime, I do think that the big things,
We're not being controversial here.
the big things that are going to happen is an increasing emphasis on generating synthetic data on which you train to take the human out of the loop, because right now we do need a lot of human labeling of data, and that's really a severe bottleneck. But there are increasingly amount of methods that generate scenarios and generate data that you train the systems on. You can build a self-driving vehicle entirely trained on 10,000 servers, and then you can put it out on the street and it will do really well. And that's what, say, Waymo is doing from Google. Yeah, they have driven a couple of million miles on real streets, and they have driven 2 billion miles in their servers. Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is self-learning systems, basically reinforcement learning, basically systems that learn, that creates a loop. I call it the AI loop. Call it whatever you want, but it's basically creating a loop where it constantly learns and explores. We saw that first in Amazon and Netflix recommendations. That's what they're doing, or we were doing, is basically constantly trying to figure out, is there something we still don't know about you? Do you like sci-fi? Maybe you like this kind of sci-fi? Basically randomly probing, maybe 10, 20% of the time, and 80% of the time we would recommend the stuff we know you like, yeah? So that's sort of really behind recommendation, is this loop of learning more and more about you. And I think that's gonna increasingly happen in a lot of situations. And then lastly, there's of course the whole robotic space, which I also think is really, really taking off now, with systems that are getting as good as people to actually hear words. I'm not saying understanding, but hear words as good as people, and they see as good as people. And then you have things like reinforcement learning that allow the robot to learn to do things that you couldn't program it ever to do. Then I think, go and look at some of the Boston Dynamics videos. They're very interesting.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
So I just wanted to add a little to the question about whether AI is going to take over and there's not going to be any room for humans anymore. I think there's kind of an easy argument to say why that won't happen. Most of the things we do in machine learning are about optimizing some kind of objective function. We're trying to optimize, say, and oftentimes that's chosen because of its mathematical simplicity, and it's some kind of proxy for what we recognize as welfare of people. But at the end of the day, the real objective function is welfare of human beings in some generalized sense. And what happens, of course, is that as the artificial intelligence comes in, there's actually a feedback loop. So in other words, now certain things are being taken over by machines. Maybe people's welfare objective function changes. So I would point to, suppose that you actually did get all the way where machines are doing everything. Then you've forgotten about that part of the objective function which says that people have to have something to do. So anyway, I would just want to echo what was said here before, yeah.
I actually want to follow up on the objective function because that's one of my things.
Yeah.
So when you use AI in gaming, a lot of game developers will say, oh, it's not interesting because the characters, they become superhuman and they kill you all the time. Well, it depends on that objective function. That objective function could also be minutes of playtime. So basically the game will learn to keep you engaged and go and go and go and go rather than just kill you off. Yeah. So it's all the magic is in your way of expressing your objective, what you want the system to learn.
Yeah. And let me sort of add to that then. What that argues for is, systems where, now we regard the objective function as static, but somehow we should be experimenting all the time with tons of objective functions so that we understand them better. The platform should be set up so that you can do that very easily.
Yep.
And I think that's not happened yet.
I have seen exercise systems where the objective function is a combination of your heart rate and the crank of your spinner bike.
Yeah.
And then the system learns actually how to coach you to be a better bicyclist.
Yeah. Other examples include what happens in healthcare a lot. I mean, there's some simple examples there. I mean, if you think about humans' own objective functions, some people would want to live as long as possible. Some people would want to live as long as possible while they're still mobile. Some people don't care about living long at all, but want to. For people, those objective functions are quite variable, and it's one of the reasons that it's harder to do this artificial intelligence in many of the healthcare situations, or at least one has to think much more about it. One has to think about this human side.
Yeah. You should see the Apple announcement today of the Apple Watch monitoring your heart rate around the clock.
Guys, let me just say, you can't pay for this. I mean, if you think about the future of AI, the insight just coming from that exchange is pretty incredible. One of my favorite questions is, what is one thing you believe that it's true that others would completely disagree with you, right? What is the one contrarian point of view that you might have? So I'm going to put you on the spot to start with.
Sure.
About the future of AI.
I'm not sure everyone will disagree, but maybe some would. I think telecom is prime for disruption. Many of these inventions in telecoms are more than 20 years old. You take the TCP/IP protocols, you take the RAN protocols, mobile networks and all that. Many of it is 20 years old or more. And then if you look at the field it has, the cost curve versus the price curve, the exponential growth of data and the cost for operators to provide it versus the revenue that they're getting out of it. And then you add the few parameters here, the amount of data they have. Granted, it may not be labeled, but they have computable data or they have digital data. They have a huge amount of CapEx that they're capable to spend. The top 40 operators around the world spend about $400 billion a year. That's not a small change, right? And in combination with that, the sheer amount of talent that they have, an average telecom operator or the telecom industry has a degree or a double degree. So many of them, more than 50% of the talent is actually a degree holder. So if I take the talent, the CapEx, the problems in the industry and the age, I think it's very, very prime for disruption for AI. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah. Chris?
So I think I would answer that I think AI has the ability to change human behavior, and I think it's something that I don't know if people would disagree with, but I think people don't think about. And the reality is that right now, and it's interesting you mentioned the Apple Watch with the heart rate because I was thinking about Fitbits and such, and how we mean to be good. We really mean to, I so mean to exercise. But if AI is able to, something that is AI enhanced is able to push me at the right time and push me with the right message, I'm that much more likely to do that thing that I've really meant to do.
Yeah.
I really think that ultimately is how, you said disrupting industry. I see it as disrupting the way changing the way we live our lives.
Speaking of behavior, Seth threw a presentation yesterday that came out one of the large tech platform using machine learning to teach animal behavior. And early prototype, train the dog to do all kinds of things, train the chicken to do. I was watching the video thinking, wow, you can actually train chicken to do things now. But it's sort of beginning of sort of what we're talking about. Gunnar, sorry, you say something.
Well, actually, I wanted to build on that. I tend to agree with, I think, not that everyone would disagree with this, but I do think that there is a bit of a divide between people who do believe that it's really mostly about, artificial intelligence and tech versus is it the interaction with human beings? And I come down very strongly on the side of I believe it's a shared thing between humans and machines. And I just have to give my own incident here. I just installed on my phone a pedometer about a month ago. And it's definitely modified my behavior. I find every day I want to walk to get up to those 10,000 steps. So.
Danny, one thing you believe others would disagree with you?
Yeah, we talk about AI eating the world or whatever, but it's also going to do a lot of good things to us. So I saw an investment that Monsanto has been doing in a company that basically use computer vision to really only spray herbicide on the wheat and not on the corn. Yeah. So basically on the back of the tractor, they drive through the field and they only sprinkle on the bad guys and not on the good guys. In that sense, they only use about 10% of the Roundup that they normally use. And they said, we better invest in this than someone else. I know Bayer is working on a method where they use laser, and it's all machine learning based. Yeah, they use laser to detect insects. So you only spray your field when there are insects, and you actually will tell you which kind of insects are on your field. So you only spray what you need to spray when you need it, yeah? So I think we can go on and on with these kind of applications that are completely revolutionary. Selective watering of plants, where you basically, every plant is thought of as an IoT, yeah? So you basically know how much humidity they need. It's just, things that will bring, yield up an order of magnitude from where we are today, which is going to be needed.
Yep. Michael, anything to add?
I think the efficiencies that you're talking about create this enormous opportunity for human beings to rethink the way they actually engage with everything. And the rate of acceleration in technology is, from where I'm seeing, outpacing the social evolution that we have to face. So I think that one of the interesting things that we'll see, you see change in behavior with cell phones over the last decade. What's it going to look like in the next 10 years when AI is able to take on some of these tasks that were historically human-based? And again, I think that opens a huge amount of opportunity, but it also is very disruptive. So I think it's going to be exciting to watch.
That's great, thanks. I think we have a few minutes left. Rare opportunity if someone in the audience wants to have a question or two. I think we could be open for it. Go ahead, please. Right.
Is there a mic, or I guess I'll talk loud?
Yeah.
So Nate Ioannis with Microsoft, I lead our AI and operator strategy. Leaving AI in terms of the concerns about the future of work and so forth, that's one discussion. But I think that a discussion that more of us should have in terms of AI and national security, where you have leaders like Putin who predict that whoever leads the race to AI will dominate the world. And clearly, there's been some massive concerns with our election systems being compromised by technology, and the discussions around AI and just our position in the globe. And so I'd love to hear your takes on that. Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue, first of all, that it's sort of an ill-defined statement. What does it mean to win AI? I mean, AI is huge. It's not like going to the moon. And so, in a sense, I think, there are going to be many winners in AI. Some people get to something, some organizations get to some things faster than others. So, yeah.
So let's just say AI is new oil, right? So data is oil. And very similar to oil, there's different levels of it. And you see it in terms of even our gasoline pipes, where more expensive oil is more refined and pure. And more machines that require pure data will have a bigger impact out of sight. So let's just say from the data angle of it, in terms of the race to AI to grab the most data.
Well, I think that there's three things to think about there. One is that if you look at the way that the EU approaches data and approaches privacy, it is you have the ability to do a forget me. In the US, it's much more of a free market. In China and Russia, it's a system where the government owns the data. So if you're thinking purely from data, there's that part of it. When you're saying who wins, my answer would be whoever educates the data scientists the most. I mean, because ultimately, I would argue the quality of the AI has to do with the quality of the people creating the AI. So that probably leads to a whole different panel discussion about does the US have an issue with undermining science right now, but that probably is not this panel's discussion.
Daniel, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I just have a little anecdote where you sort of look at AI up against AI, and that is, some companies allow reviews on their website, and what these companies do, they run machine learning to detect fake reviews. Yeah, so you constantly classify reviews as either good or fake. Well, I did run into some friends at Google, and they very excitedly told me that they use the opposite way of machine learning with generative net, where they basically use machine learning to learn to write reviews that don't get detected, which means that now I need to ramp up my ability to detect these fake reviews. And as my machine learning model gets better and better, what I do is I actually train their machine learning model to get better and better, and now we have an arms race. And this is just a small anecdote, a small example, but I think it's also what is going to happen in the whole fighting fake news. Is that right now I can see it in a Twitter account, it is fake. It's very easy to see, but it's going to get harder and harder and harder because the other guys are constantly going to use machine learning. So we are not people against people. It's basically machine learning systems fighting each other, and that's kind of an interesting scenario.
It is. Well, with that, what an amazing conversation and discussion. Round of applause for the panelists here.